Hello, I'm Moosh, and I'm going to talk about part 2 of Inside Job. There will definitely be spoilers, but I need to talk about this other stuff before I even get into discussing part 2. It's actually very important that you watch my first video if you want to fully understand my viewpoint. You should at least watch the latter part of my first Inside Job video where I analyzed Rand, unless you don't want to have any idea where I'm coming from. As far as this video goes, it's very long, but it had to be because there are a lot of things I want to talk about. I've added timestamps in the description if you've already seen my first video, and you want to just skip ahead to me reviewing or commentating on part 2 or whatever else. I would of course prefer that everyone just watch the whole video, but do as you like, I added timestamps for convenience. I'm putting a trigger warning here now, because I'm not even sure if it's possible for me to talk about the show the way that I want to, without offending someone, even though that's not my intention. Because this is the internet. I don't want to offend anyone, I have no interest in doing that. But it's probably going to happen anyway. So watch this video at your own risk, because you might be annoyed or offended by some of my opinions. The tone of this video is probably going to be pretty different than my first video, because the show went in a weirdly realistic direction that was originally much harder for me to watch. It would have been easier for me to deal with if they'd gone in a more fantasy type direction, with Rand acting kinda like Vader and being like, "Come to the dark side, Reagan, you're just like me." The trailer kinda made it seem like that's what they were gonna do, but the show really likes to subvert our expectations. And on some level, I always knew they were going to make things real, and that it was gonna be hard to watch. But I've had time to process everything now, and I think I can review or give commentary on the rest of the show. Or at least, I'll do my best. Unfortunately, due to the realistic direction they went in order for me to do that, I have to make things more personal than I originally wanted to.
サイヤ人は生まれてすぐ戦士の素質を検査される。貴様のように大した敵のいない星へ送り込まれるのだ。要するに、貴様は落ちこぼれだ。
感謝しなきゃな。それによ、エリートを超えることがあるかもよ。
では努力だけではどうやっても越えられぬ壁を見せてやろう。今のが限界だとしたらとんだ期待外れだぜ。
なんて野郎だ。
はじけてまだれ。
It was very difficult for me to even figure out how to approach talking about the remaining episodes. This is an adult animated comedy, and the show is dealing with very adult themes. This is literally a story about the long-lasting effects of emotional abuse on characters that are in their 30s, or at least that's the subtext of the main storyline. And the people writing the show are in their 30s. Reagan's not 19, she's not in her early 20s, she's a 30-year-old woman. So if a viewer doesn't have the right kind of life experience, and or if they're not of a certain age, or if they haven't interacted with enough people with different sorts of personality types, then they're not going to be able to fully understand everything that's happening. I don't mean to be condescending about it, it's just the truth. I made my first video before I saw part 2, and I was right about pretty much everything, so at this point it's safe to say that I understand the character of Rand fairly well. He is very misunderstood by the fanbase, though. You can think whatever you like about him, he's obviously not a good person and he's a bad father. But Rand's still more complicated than most people realize. The same can't be said for his ex-wife. She's about as uncomplicated as a fictional character can be. She reminds me a bit of my mother, but my mother is a covert narcissist, and Tamiko's not like that. I was very close to my mother as a child, and I didn't even realize she was a narcissist until I became an adult. And then of course came the pain. Tamiko is quite different than my mother, as is her non-existent relationship with her daughter. But frankly, the show made Tamiko's narcissism so obvious that I can't believe there are actually some fans who think she's not one. The word narcissist is derived from Greek mythology. There was a guy named Narcissus who fell in love with his own reflection when he saw it in a pool of water. And he eventually died because he wouldn't stop staring at his own reflection. He was in love with himself. Does that sound familiar to anyone? I mean, come on, guys. I actually did think Rand might be a narcissist for a while, because some of his behavior does make him seem like a narcissist on the surface. But if you really pay attention to his behavior, there's too much evidence that proves that he isn't one. Narcissists don't accept responsibility for their bad behavior, and they don't accept criticism or sincerely apologize and try to change. This scene is actually very similar to a conversation I had with my own mother. I loved my mother with all my heart. I trusted her more than anyone. I thought she was my best friend. To me, she could do no wrong. Then I grew up and realized things were more complicated than I had originally thought. All my repressed feelings came to the surface. Confusion, pain, betrayal. I didn't want to criticize her. I was afraid that I would hurt her feelings. But I was even more afraid to learn the truth. Did she really not care about me? And even after all the manipulation and emotional abuse she inflicted on me my whole life, I would have forgiven her if she had just said she was sorry. It was hard, but I mustered up all my courage and tried to tell her how much she had hurt me. I was crying. I made myself vulnerable and was pouring my heart out to her. And she rolled her eyes like a teenager and scoffed and walked away. I wasn't even done speaking. She didn't even have enough respect for me as a human being to let me finish my sentence. It was like as soon as I stopped agreeing with her, she wanted nothing to do with me. I thought maybe she would apologize eventually, but she never did. She just pretended like it never happened. I thought I knew her, but as an adult I saw her for what she really was. My mother broke my heart, and my relationship with her was never the same after that. Rand doesn't react this way when Reagan confronts him in a similar fashion. They're literally in public, tons of people are watching them. And this very arrogant, proud man admits he was wrong, even though he doesn't understand why. And he hugs her, even though it obviously makes him very uncomfortable. And yet he's the one who's the narcissist. Sure. Tamiko's very existence is almost offensive to me because my own mother hurt me so badly, but I eventually made my peace with her by closing myself off emotionally so she couldn't hurt me anymore. I still talk to her sometimes, but our relationship is very superficial because it has to be for my own protection. And now there's this character in this show that kinda acts like my mother, but all her flaws are insanely exaggerated and she doesn't have a single redeeming quality. Comparing Tamiko to my mother is kind of like comparing first grade math to advanced calculus. If there's such a thing as a basic bitch narcissist, Tamiko would be the perfect example of that because there's nothing to this character other than self-love. Tamiko is really more of a parody of a terrible mother than anything. I've never even met a person in real life that's as simplistic as she is. Her narcissism is played for laughs, for the most part, at least in part 1. And it blows my mind how many fans don't realize how awful she is. I already knew she was bad based on what I saw in part 1, but part 2 made her look even worse. I mean, if you like Tamiko and you're already bothered by how I'm talking about her, you're not going to want to hear what I have to say about her later. I'm just telling you now. I'm just telling you. Are we invited to your movie? No, I'm just telling you. Anyway, we kind of have to take what's happening in the story literally because we can see that a lot of these things have tangibility. And you can't just make a show based entirely on symbolism. That's literally a giant robot bear. He's literally deleting her friend from her mind. And there's no way to look at that and say that's not evil. It very obviously is. But Inside Job has a lot of symbolism that many fans don't pick up on or take into account. Rand is also very obviously insane. Or at least it's very heavily implied that he is. Even if the show never openly acknowledges this. He has to be insane because that's the only way his behavior makes any sense. And even though that doesn't excuse anything that he does, and I never said that it did, to me the way that his mind is wired and his intentions when he's hurting Reagan like this should be taken into consideration. The episode Blue Bloods tells you everything you need to know about Rand, at least in regard to him being a father. He reads this book his wife wrote, blaming him for everything and absolving herself of all responsibility and portraying him as the villain, and he says, "Me? A bad dad?" And he throws the book across the room. Then he starts putting Barrow back together, and Reagan's like, why are you rebuilding that thing? And Rand gets defensive and says, I took care of your every need. Look at all this stuff I made that proves that I love you. He doesn't say it like that, but that's what he means. All those things he made for her are a representation of his love. Even this stupid perfume that he made to repel boys was his way of protecting her. Who needs birth control now? No boys are gonna hurt her if they can't even get close, which of course is completely ridiculous, and it's interfering with her learning to form meaningful connections with other people. But Rand doesn't see it like that because he didn't understand that was something Reagan needed. There's nothing textbook about Rand in my opinion. He's very complicated. And he's a combination of a lot of different ideas, which is part of why so many fans interpret him in so many different ways. And of course, if you have unresolved daddy issues, or whatever you want to call it, and you don't fully understand the character of Rand, you're going to project your own issues or feelings onto this character. And you might say, well, isn't that what you're doing? I don't deny the fact that I had a poor relationship with my own parents, and much of the subject matter in this show evoked a lot of emotion in me. But technically, I'm not projecting, because I don't see things in Rand that aren't there. And he behaves very differently than my father. But he's so well written that I can recognize some of my father's characteristics and behavior in him. That was why I knew from the beginning that he loved Reagan. I knew that he did, it was just difficult for me to explain how I knew that. And there are a lot of other fans that could see that too. To us, it was obvious. Rand is basically a very intelligent, successful man, or at least he was successful at one point. But he has very low emotional intelligence. His lack of empathy and his inability to see things from Reagan's perspective, and him thinking, well, this is what would work for me, so it'll work for you, is at least partially an archetype of the kind of father that I had. My dad bought me and my brothers whatever we wanted when we were kids. Being the middle child, I wasn't as spoiled as they were, because I was more used to sharing and waiting my turn and getting hand-me-downs. I didn't get as much attention, but I was still spoiled. Ninja Turtles was very popular back then, and I would meticulously pick out the toy that I wanted. Oh, Magician Raphael, I don't have this one. And I would ask my father, Daddy, can I have this? And he never said no. If he ever said no, I don't remember it. That's how often he said yes. Oh, you want that? Where's my wallet? And he was always giving me money. I tended to hang on to any money he gave me and kind of budget it. But my brother told me that our dad would give him a 20 and he'd immediately spend it. And then the next day he'd be like, Dad, can I have more money? And my dad would be like, I just gave you money yesterday. But he would be reaching into his wallet as he said it. I just gave you money yesterday, god damn it. Here's even more. Stop spending my money. But he would just give more money. So ridiculous. My father grew up very poor. He was from South America, and there was some sort of natural disaster when he was a kid that destroyed his family's home. He also suffered a very serious injury, and his family kind of went into financial ruin treating it. So he grew up feeling like a burden, and thought his family didn't want him. And he was so ashamed of being poor. He told me his home had dirt floors, and he was always eating onion and squash soup, which he hated. So when he came to America and got a high-paying job and had a family, it was very important to him to provide for us financially. He wanted us to stay together and be a family, and have money so that we could have the things that we wanted. That was his responsibility as our father. So when I asked him for something, to him, that was like me asking, Daddy, do you love me? And he did. And that was why he always said yes. He wasn't ever gonna say no, because that was how he understood how to express love. And I see that part of my father in Rand, his inability to express his love for Reagan in a healthy way, when I hear him talk about his inventions. I always assumed all this crazy stuff Rand was doing to Reagan was symbolism for emotional abuse, and I still think it is, because I don't see what else it could possibly represent, because he doesn't hit her. The only time he ever puts his hands on her and physically abuses her, or whatever, is in this scene. He pushes her really hard to stop her from finding out about something he did 20 years ago, when he was a different person. He knows if she finds out about this, it's going to hurt her and damage their relationship, and that's why he pushes her. And then he immediately says he's sorry, because he knows he's not supposed to physically abuse her, and he always did. He doesn't even hesitate to apologize here, it's almost like a reflex, very telling. Barrow is kind of a weird contradiction because technically that is physical abuse, but Rand created Barrow to comfort Reagan. And then Barrow wound up hurting her instead.
My prime directive. Barrow is supposed to make Reagan happy. Barrow is proud of Reagan.
Oh, shut the fuck up, Barrow!
I don't think it makes sense to view Barrow as evidence for Rand being a physically abusive father that's very contradictory to everything else that he does. To me, Barrow is just another example of Rand inventing something to fill some sort of need that he sees Reagan has. Barrow, of course, winds up doing the opposite of what he intended it to do. The really disturbing thing about their relationship is that that's how almost all of his parenting techniques work. Barrow's existence actually proves that Rand didn't fully see Reagan as an extension of himself, because he says that touchy-feely crap makes you weak, but he still made Barrow to comfort her. This is part of what I mean when I say Rand's complicated. Even this comment he makes about her being an insurance policy is honestly pretty ambiguous, because what does that even mean? Him saying this could be interpreted in a lot of different ways. It doesn't even necessarily mean he was planning to steal her promotion. It could just mean he wanted to maintain influence in the company by having her work there, so he could eventually get back in. Nepotism. He wound up not even needing Reagan to get back into Cognito because he got back in by blackmailing JR and manipulating him into selling some of his shares in the company. He did clearly think Reagan was like him, because I don't believe for 1 second that he would have deleted Oren if he knew that would negatively affect her. But on some level, he did know even very early on that she wasn't exactly like him. Plenty of parents think their kids are more like them than they actually are, but that doesn't necessarily translate to them being a narcissist. Even Rand and Tamiko's reactions to the principal saying she has the highest test scores I've ever seen show you the difference in how they view their daughter. Rand's like, damn right she does, and he looks like he's proud of her even if he doesn't say it. But Tamiko's expression is very neutral until she starts making it about herself. I brag about her to my guru all the time. As awful as what Rand does to Reagan is, he really did see that kid as a threat, or a negative influence on his daughter, and he was trying to protect her. Look how upset he is. He'll weaken you with his mediocrity. As inexcusable as Rand's actions are, at least I understand why he's behaving this way. What I want to know is, why isn't Tamiko saying anything? Her husband is literally ranting and raving like a lunatic over their daughter having one friend, and Tamiko's just sitting there like a piece of furniture. Why isn't she doing anything? I'll tell you why. It's because she doesn't care. Look at her face. She couldn't give less of a rat's ass about what's happening in this scene.
Well, I'm not Rand and I'm not Reagan, so what do I care? I'm Tamiko. I only care about things that have something to do with me. Does anyone have a mirror? I'm bored. I want to admire my reflection.
Here's more proof as to why I think all that crazy stuff Rand was doing to her was symbolism for emotional abuse. This is probably the best evidence of that exists in the show. The last straw for Reagan and the catalyst for Rand finally accepting that he's a bad father is him emotionally abusing her. She remembers him emotionally abusing her in the past. Notice that he's building Barrow here. That's very important. The writers know exactly what they're doing. Child Reagan wants his attention, she wants his validation, she wants his love. She shows him her experiment. He thinks it's cute. Aw, sweetie, that's adorable. He does think it's cute because it is. And then he says all these horrible things to her. Your turtles are gonna die, you killed them. It is cute, but it's also stupid. That's exactly what he thinks, so that's what he says. He isn't able to see things from her perspective. Technically, what he's saying is true, but he's being very insensitive to her feelings, and he's being very cruel, and it hurts her. Then he's like, let's go kill your turtles together, kid. Jesus Christ, Rand. As with pretty much everything in the show, things are very exaggerated, but this is a very accurate representation of a father emotionally abusing his kid without realizing that's what he's doing. To me, seeing Rand treat Reagan like this was harder to watch than anything else he did. The Barrow stuff was completely ridiculous, and I didn't take it seriously at all. But this made things real. My father, who didn't understand normal sibling dynamics because of the abuse he suffered as a child, used to talk to me like this when I was a kid, when my younger brother and I would be having some sort of disagreement. He always took my brother's side and said horrible things to me. I don't even know how to explain how much it hurt. It made me think he didn't love me. We go back to the present and we see that Reagan is traumatized, remembering how he treated her. Then Rand comes in and does the same stupid thing he did back then. That's cute, I figured they would have fired you by now. I mean, you're half as good as me, so... Look at his face. He doesn't think there's anything wrong with talking to her like this. Barrow is nowhere to be seen. These are all just words. His words hurt Reagan, and she leaves. Rand turns to the TV and sees the latest incarnation of the Ninja Turtles. They're still making these? Yes, they are, Rand. They won't ever stop. They'll never stop reinventing the Ninja Turtles. It'll never end. Rand does the same thing again when they're in her apartment. Oh, that invention that you worked really hard on and put your heart and soul into, I threw it in the trash. Dad, you can't just throw away my inventions. I need these to shoot hippies on the moon. Then he just keeps talking about himself. Reagan, who is very hurt and offended by his abuse, leaves. Reagan goes to the moon and Rand follows her. What are you doing here? I need space from you. Well, you weren't looking for my glasses, so... Is that really why he followed her to the moon? I doubt it. This dude is completely obsessed with his daughter, and frankly, she does need space from him. You're a bad father. I don't want you to be my dad anymore. What? I am your dad, and I'm gonna prove it. Reagan wants this other guy to be her father, and Rand doesn't like that, and it hurts his feelings. They argue. Notice that in this scene, no one else is here. It's just the two of them. This is a private moment, and Rand, finally realizing the seriousness of the situation and feeling safe enough in this moment because no one else is around, makes himself very vulnerable and tells Reagan how he really feels. The work you've done here is impressive. It's a shame we have to destroy it. The reason I'm hard on you is to push you to be better than I was. Now, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and that's clearly the point. Rand's thought process is so strange, and his emotional intelligence is so low, that he didn't understand that talking to her like this was abusive and that it was hurting her. And that does sound like insanity, doesn't it? This is what I mean when I say the show has a lot of symbolism. The show used this sort of over-the-top imagery on purpose, to get the audience emotionally involved in what was happening, so we would all understand how hurt Reagan was by the abuse Rand was inflicting on her. To me, this was emotional abuse. All of it was. All of this is the same thing to me.
Your shitty parenting messed me up for life, and now I guess I'm broken forever.
Hey, look, family is an experiment. And maybe not all my experiments are...
Symbolism. Rand had no idea what he was doing when he was parenting her. And even though Rand probably still doesn't understand why what he was doing was wrong, and may never be able to understand why it was wrong, he now understands that it hurt her. I should have told you how I really felt, he says. I am a bad father, and you deserve better. This means a lot to her. Narcissists don't behave this way, and they don't say such things. A narcissist would never admit they were wrong, and make themselves vulnerable like this. I realize that technically we have to take what happens in the story literally, but it's very difficult for me to do that because the symbolism in the show resonates with me very deeply. Nobody's dad builds a giant robot bear to hug them, nobody's dad deletes a friend from his kid's mind. Everything in this show is very exaggerated because it's a fictional story, but there are plenty of parents in real life who abuse their kids without understanding why what they were doing was wrong. And years later, they apologize and try to change, and their adult child either forgives them or they don't. There is no way to earn forgiveness. When you hurt a loved one, all you can do is apologize. And if that person doesn't want to have a relationship with you anymore, for whatever reason, whether it be because they're afraid of being hurt again, or because they're too angry, or because they don't believe you're truly sorry, then they won't forgive you. I don't believe anyone is owed forgiveness, and I don't believe that forgiving someone who hurts you is always the best thing to do for every person on Earth. For some people it helps to forgive, and for others it doesn't. Forgiveness is a very personal choice, and it can take time. Love hurts. Opening your heart to another person gives them the power to hurt you. The question is mending a damaged relationship worth it to you or not? I just want Reagan to be happy, and to do what's best for her. I do have a lot of sympathy for Rand. To me, he's very tragic. But I understand why not everyone sees him that way. Rand is essentially a retired supervillain, but he had also gotten to the point where he was trying to change. He did start out like JR, they're both villains, but JR is businessman evil and Rand is mad scientist evil. I don't even think Rand cared all that much about getting his job back, or he got to the point where he didn't care. He just wanted to be in control.
Rand, we don't know who these guys are, or the true extent of their powers. We should not go behind their backs and fuck with them.
That's why we need this machine as an insurance policy. Trust me, you'll thank me one day.
He wanted the satisfaction of knowing he could come back anytime he wanted, and to make sure JR knew that. My kid works at your company, a-hole, and now I own even more shares than you do. Checkmate. It's funny because there are so many fans that think that Rand is a narcissist, but he really doesn't act like a narcissist at all. Him being arrogant over literally being a super genius doesn't mean he has delusions of grandeur. The only delusions of grandeur Rand ever really had was him thinking he was a good father, but he eventually accepted that that wasn't true. Rand keeps to himself most of the time, and he doesn't even seem to care what other people think of him aside from Reagan. Reagan is aware of this, and she even points it out to the audience.
And take this in the best way possible. My dad just doesn't care about you guys.
It's true. I don't even know most of your names.
Brett calls him a psychopathic alcoholic in this scene, which is only half true. He is an alcoholic, but he's not a psychopath. Rand doesn't react to this because Brett's opinion doesn't matter to him, but his expression immediately changes when Reagan calls him an asshole. Rand having a daughter and him learning over the course of their relationship that she was different than him, and him accepting that, and him eventually being receptive to her criticizing him, and him changing because he cares about what she thinks of him, and his priorities changing, and him deciding that being in her life as her father was now more important to him than his original ambition, is a pretty compelling way to write a villain. And he was willing to stand aside and let Reagan run Cognito in his place. He didn't even seem to care about how she was going to run things. He was totally fine with her taking over and running the company however she wanted. She even asks him if she has to be ruthless to run Cognito, and he's just like, fuck JR. I mean, he doesn't even give her any advice. He's just like, I'm proud of myself for raising you, I'm proud of you, you'll do great, kid. He's so ridiculous. He is proud of her, he just doesn't know how to say it. The important thing is that he's trying. Then Reagan finds out about what he did to her 20 years ago, and he handles things terribly, and she rejects him, and he decides to take her job, perhaps believing that he can now have his cake and eat it too. He's powerful again, and when he had his job, he also had his wife and his kid. That's pretty simplistic reasoning, but this guy's terrible at relationships, so I can see why he'd think he can eventually get them back now that he has his job again. And of course, at this point, Reagan no longer believes that Rand loves her because he's not acting like he does. And she's very understandably hurt and pissed off at him. This scene was very difficult for me to analyze. I tried to imagine what it would be like if I were having a very abrupt, dramatic confrontation with my own father over why he emotionally abused me as a child. As an adult, when our relationship had improved, I did try to ask my father about why he treated me the way that he did. And he was kind of defensive the way that Rand is in this scene. He said, I was trying to protect your brother because I thought you were bullying him. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense, that's not what was happening. And he kind of got even more defensive and said, I did the same thing for you when your older brother was bullying you, I was trying to protect you. And it just sounded like insanity to me. I didn't push him about it very much because it was very obvious to me that he wasn't really able to fully understand why it was wrong to treat me that way. He was sorry that he did it. He apologized to me more than once for being a bad father, but us trying to have a conversation about why he talked to me the way that he did when I was a child was ultimately very unproductive. Our perspectives were just too different. My father was too emotionally damaged to fully understand my viewpoint. And that's kinda how Rand is in this scene. And of course you mix in him being an insane retired supervillain, and it's no wonder he handled things so terribly. Rand does admit he was wrong, but he's being so defensive and insensitive about it that Reagan very understandably won't accept his very inadequate apology. The really disturbing thing about this scene to me is that as terrible as Rand's apology is, it's still better than any apology my mother ever gave me. Because she never admitted she was wrong. At least, not without also blaming my father or giving a list of excuses in the same breath. Rand is a very strange character because he's like a combination of both of my parents' good and bad qualities. Even the way he rolls his eyes in this scene reminds me of my mother, when I confronted her over her emotionally abusing me my whole life. And the way he hands her this gun reminds me of how she expected me to just forget about it. Rand doesn't leave though, he listens to Reagan, and he does acknowledge her feelings on some level. And then he admits he was wrong in a very defensive, insensitive way. He's manipulative like my mother, but when Rand manipulates Reagan, part of it is for his own benefit, at least sometimes. But he's also being protective, and genuinely believes he's doing what's best for her. But when my mother manipulated me, she did it purely for herself, and she didn't care that she'd hurt me. Rand is ultimately much more like my father than my mother, but he does have a bit of my mom in him. Rand is complicated, and Tamiko is simple. Rand is like both of my parents mixed together with a supervillain and a dash of Rick. And Tamiko is like my mother if she were some parody of a human being that had no redeeming qualities whatsoever.
Reagan. Can it be both?
Inside Job has some pretty subversive storytelling. Tamiko writing this book where Rand's the villain represents the concept of a bad mother blaming everything on the dad and not accepting any responsibility for whatever part she may have played in hurting their children. In real life, when mothers do this, they'll be close to the kids, and they'll be manipulative, or at least that's how it was with me. My own mother did this, and I hated my father for years. The way a lot of fans hate Rand and the things they say about him, he was hurting Reagan on purpose, he never cared about her, he doesn't love her, is the same way I felt about my own father for years. It took me a long time to stop seeing him that way, and to realize that it was more complicated than that. But in this show, it's reversed. Reagan was close to her dad, and she didn't even have a relationship with her mother. It's almost like an inside joke for anyone who knows what it's like to be raised by parents like this. To me, this story is about Reagan being abused by both of her parents, and it's at least partially an exaggerated reversal of my own experiences growing up. Both of my parents hurt me, but my mother hurt me much worse. Even the way Rand acts in the finale, breaking into Cognito to bring Reagan cupcakes, reminds me of the last time I saw my father. My dad came to my work and was just kind of hanging around and being weird. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I just wanted to see you." And then he asked me if he could have a hug. And I kind of rolled my eyes and said, "I guess." And I hugged him. And he said, "You're all I have." My dad's in there somewhere, and that's the part of Rand I like the most. If you guys knew how many times I cried trying to record some of this stuff, it hasn't been easy. I get it, I fucked up. Well, let's not dwell on it, let's just forget about it and go back to normal. Reagan hesitates for a long time and finally makes her decision. Fine, you don't love me? Then I don't forgive you, get out of my life. And that really hurts Rand's feelings, it probably breaks his heart. Okay, now we're finally gonna get into part 2. Keep in mind that this is an adult animated comedy, and due to my life experiences, I'm in on the joke. I mean, not everything in part 2 is funny, some of it is very disturbing, at least to me, and some of it is sad, but I am gonna laugh at the parts that I do think are funny. Rand thinks, okay, you think I'm the bad guy? Fine, then I will be. And then he takes her job. Hey there, Jellybean. He knows perfectly well how dickish it was to call her that, and that's why he did it. Sorry, kid, I'm your boss now, and I'm also still your dad. He's lying. He's not sorry. He's enjoying this. You're right, we both do need space. Paper curtain thingy. He's just making it worse. Reagan wants to overthrow her dad, and none of her friends support her. Even Brett won't help. I feel bad for her, but at the same time, it's funny. She literally tried to form a coup against her father, and he's just like, "That's so cute. You need a timeout." Rand, do you really think this is gonna help? You're just like your old man, which of course isn't true, and he knows that. He didn't used to, but he does now. Nothing higher than a 3. Normally he doesn't intentionally hurt her. This is very unusual behavior for Rand. He's being childish because she hurt his feelings. The show makes this very clear with this man-child stuff later. This man is so ridiculous, I can't take him seriously anymore. So Reagan is very understandably upset, and then Brett comes over. "Why didn't you help me?" she says. "You're supposed to be my friend." I get why she's upset, but honestly, Rand's her father, and she doesn't have much to worry about from him as far as physical retaliation goes. The same can't be said for the rest of the characters, though. They don't understand what Rand's capable of at this point, and they very obviously don't have the same relationship with him that Reagan does. Her drunkenly climbing onto the table like that and insisting that everyone immediately join her in overthrowing Rand also wasn't the best way to go about it. She's very upset, and she's kind of losing it at this point, and Brett can see that, so I kind of understand why he wouldn't help her in this moment. He sees that she needs emotional support though, so he suggests that she goes to this meeting. The funny thing is Brett is helping her the way that she needs to be helped. Good old Brett with his emotional support. Thank you, Brett. She definitely needs some. She goes to the meeting and is prompted by Mothman. Reagan, you want to tell us about your feelings? She doesn't even want to. She's just like, oh, fine. My dad deleted my memories and then he stole my job and nobody would help me. My life is so horrible. And she has every right to be very upset about all the bullshit Rand is putting her through. Then this random guy completely invalidates her feelings. Cry me a river, your dad deleted your memories, try being the guy who deletes the memories. At least you have nepotism on your side, you think you have it bad, I have it even worse. What is this dude on about, the audacity? And he keeps saying she's crying, but he's the one who sounds like he's gonna cry. It's funny because as much of a baby as Rand is being, this guy's behavior is just as bad to me because he has no emotional connection to Reagan. At least Rand was hurt by what happened between him and Reagan. At least he's her dad and he had a relationship with her for years and there are a lot of complicated emotions between them. This guy doesn't even know Reagan, so I don't understand what his problem is. I guess he's just projecting his issues onto her. Her reaction was more or less the same as mine. Whoa, D-bag, what's your problem? And then he just keeps on whining and he says if she really wants to change the world, she'll shelve her feelings and do what she has to do. He's being a huge jerk, and I don't particularly care for his very insensitive criticism towards her. But he kinda has a point in regard to her stewing in her feelings like this and not taking action. That's not going to accomplish anything. Reagan agrees, and filled with determination, she leaves with the intention of taking her father down on her own. This originally scared me because I was afraid she was gonna do something crazy. I understand that you're angry at Rand, Reagan, but he's not evil, he's just stupid. Please calm down. This show is killing me. Dietrich is one of the best characters in Part 2. This character is hilarious. I love the banter between him and Rand, it's so funny. I thought they fired you for all this, he's a mess. I mean, that's not very nice to say, Mr. Antlers, but he isn't wrong. He still has the remote. I love how they made us think he was gonna do something nefarious with it. Instead, he's just like, look how powerful I am, I can move the moon. That's very impressive, Rand. I mean, it kind of is. Not many people can literally move the moon, but it's also not gonna fix anything with his family. Reagan attempts to take down her father, but she notices that Ron is doing the same thing to Dietrich. I didn't like Ron when he first appeared, but he gets in the middle of this conflict that's going on between Reagan and Rand. And I am so grateful for it. I did not want them to fight like this, and this character puts a stop to it. Ron, you're my hero. I did not like you at first, but I do now. Please distract her. And they get into this childish fight. Quit sabotaging my sabotage. No, you quit it. Get off me. Ron was very annoying to me at first, but honestly, this character is amazing, and it was really good that Reagan met him. Her killing this guy with complete ease and no hesitation is very telling because she could have done this to Rand anytime she wanted. She can control him with her bots. That's probably why this scene even exists, to show us that Reagan is the one with the power here, and she could kill Rand easily, or hurt him very badly if that was really what she wanted to do. But that's her father, and at this point, even though he's being a complete jackass, she still loves him, and he trusts her not to hurt him like that. I mean, he walked right into this, and it clearly didn't occur to him that she might try something. He had to know how much power he was giving her by using her bots. I guess I didn't need to be worried about Rand. Reagan wasn't going to hurt him, at least not very badly. There's evidence showing the audience that Reagan and Rand still care about each other even after everything that happened between them. Very impressive writing here. Reagan and Ron bond. The dialogue here is pretty deep and meaningful. The enemies to lovers trope is very cliche, there's no denying that. But this helped her, so how can I not be grateful for it? Tropes exist for a reason, and sometimes they work very well. He isn't saving her, they're saving each other. And this is also helping Rand because it's distracting Reagan from continuing to stew in her anger and resentment, and very understandably taking it out on him. This is exactly what Reagan needs. But because this is a comedy, it can't just be romantic, it also has to make me laugh and make me really uncomfortable, so this also happens. Oh my god, I need to move on from this. God, this episode. Unless? No! No unless. Moving on. It's funny, but please stop. So her sleeping with this guy and being distracted by him helps her cope with her feelings. And that's very good for her. She needed this. And he did too.
You know what? I'm done wasting my energy trying to fight my dad. He's just gonna fuck things up on his own anyway. Maybe my next crazy plot should be my own happiness.
Reagan, I'm so proud of you. That's exactly what he's gonna do. Ignore him. Let him dig his own grave and just live your life. The way she was angry at Rand and how she may have even hated him is similar to how I felt about my mother after my dad died. Any complicated feelings I had for her, the hope that maybe she would apologize and we could fix things, evaporated. She just kept blaming him in a really obnoxious, subtle, manipulative way. She was never going to apologize to me or accept any responsibility for what she'd done. To me, to my father, to my whole family. My love for her turned to hatred. She betrayed me and hurt me worse than anyone ever had. And she villainized my father and interfered with our relationship, and now he was gone forever. I hated her so much. It was hard for me to let go of those feelings, but I eventually managed to do it. It was self-destructive and it was only hurting me even more. The show is dealing with very adult themes, and I'm very impressed that they wrote it like this. It's showing the audience that Reagan is processing her pain and anger and dealing with her abuse in a very mature way. Good for you, Reagan. There's definitely emotion between these two characters, but as of right now, this relationship is more of a distraction or a coping mechanism. And then there's JR. I don't particularly like this character very much, but him reappearing is going to make things more interesting later. Reagan and Ron continue to mess around and cope with their feelings. Therapy. Whatever helps you, Reagan, I understand. Rand and Reagan were both mad at each other earlier, but they both seem to have moved on from that, and now Rand is weirdly obsessed with getting his ex-wife back. I thought he would be more interested in Reagan, but instead he shifts his focus to Tamiko. I don't even know how to go about trying to analyze this. Rand and Tamiko are both bad parents, and their marriage is obviously meant to be an insanely exaggerated example of a purely toxic relationship. It's not supposed to make sense. They don't respect each other, and Tamiko doesn't care about Rand, and she never did. She even looks bored in their wedding photo. It's like, lady, why did you even marry this guy? Probably because he was rich and powerful. I mean, what other reason could there have possibly been? Rand's attachment to his wife is very hypocritical of him because he made it very clear that he doesn't respect people that are not on his level intellectually. But they were married for 35 years and they have a kid together, so I think Rand sees Tamiko as part of the equation in this perfect life that he wants back. And he's feeling vulnerable because of what happened with Reagan and is looking for support and comfort. And as simple as his reasoning may be here, I lost your mother when I lost my job. It does make sense that he'd see things this way, because Tamiko didn't divorce him till he lost his job. So frankly, that probably is why she divorced him. Or at least, it was a big part of why she did it. Then she gets the house, which he probably paid for. He was the one with the job, and he was the one providing for the family financially, so what was she doing? There's nothing wrong with being a stay-at-home parent, but she clearly wasn't taking care of their child. So she wasn't pulling her weight. And she was also probably cheating on Rand. She was gone constantly, and even very early on in their relationship, she's reading this magazine. And Rand says this guy slept with his wife, and this dude doesn't even deny it. So Tamiko doesn't contribute to the family income, is completely uninvolved in the parenting, which contributed to Reagan's abuse. Neglect is abuse. She abused Reagan just like Brett's parents abused him. In fact, what she did was arguably even worse because she saw some of what Rand was doing and did nothing to stop it. She didn't try to stop it and wasn't able to, she just didn't care. She probably could have prevented that Barrow stuff if she'd insisted that she would hug Reagan instead, and she may have even been able to prevent this. So Rand gets fired, and then Tamiko divorces him, takes everything, kicks him out onto the street, and continues to make him Reagan's problem even as a 30-year-old woman. And because Reagan isn't cruel like her mother, and she loves her father, she helps him out and lets him stay with her. And then Tamiko continues to accept no responsibility for her selfish, cruel behavior. Are you for real right now, lady? If you like Tamiko, just stop watching. Tamiko comes in childishly singing about her new boyfriend. That's already annoying. She's what, in her 50s? And she's acting like a teenager? Grow the hell up, lady. Rand's reaction was initially kind of shocking to me. I mean, I knew he cared, but I didn't think they were gonna make it this obvious. His mask straight up got obliterated in this scene, and it almost took him 15 seconds to recover. I almost want to say don't let her see that, Rand, but there's no need to worry about that because Tamiko's not gonna see it, because she's not looking at him. The funny thing is, if Tamiko had brought this man here to make Rand jealous, or to elicit some sort of reaction out of him, that would have made her look better to me, because it would be an indication that she cared about someone other than herself. See how she's completely focused on her boy toy here, not looking at anyone else? Red flag.
I don't really want to talk to Rand, even though I said I wanted to. I'm not even going to say a single word to him the whole time I'm here. I just wanted to tell everyone about the premiere of my new movie, Blaming Rand for Everything. My boyfriend's starring in it, see, here's a poster.
And then Gigi's like, and we're all invited? And Tamiko acts surprised and says, no, I'm just telling you. So the very idea that Tamiko would think about someone other than herself is confusing to her. Because her inviting someone to something has nothing to do with her, so she's not interested in that. So Tamiko, who is very obviously a terrible mother, writes a book blaming her husband for everything, then she turns that book into a movie, and then she comes in here telling everybody about the movie based on the book Blaming Rand for Everything. So she's climbing up on a mountain with a megaphone, telling the whole world, oh, it's not that I was a bad mom, it's that he's a bad dad. I didn't do anything. Attention everyone on planet Earth. Rand is a bad husband and an even worse father. Everything is his fault. None of this is my fault, and I will never accept any responsibility for being a terrible mother and abusing my daughter. Holy shit, this woman is so horrible. Then Keanu gives Rand some comfort, and Rand is so distressed that he doesn't even fight it. It actually works on him for a second. Oh my god, this is so hilarious. It's like it hurts me, but it's also funny. What is this show doing to me? Then Rand's like, this will never last, which is true, it won't. Tell her, Reagan. Now, why Rand thinks Reagan is gonna help him here is a bit of a mystery. He really doesn't seem to understand how badly damaged their relationship is now. Or at least he's in denial of that at the moment. But at least him saying this is more proof that he cares about his daughter's opinion. Then Tamiko's like, why should I listen to Reagan? She never approves of my boyfriends. Reagan hasn't even stated her opinion yet. The very idea that Reagan might not approve of her mother's behavior is so offensive to Tamiko that she was preemptively like,
I don't care what Reagan thinks.
I'm trying to keep it together, but I can't stand this character, you guys. Then we see this flashback of Reagan disapproving of all of Tamiko's boyfriends. The reason this scene exists is to show the audience that Reagan doesn't understand her mother at all. Because she says, Mom, you can't date these guys, they'll hurt you. That's not true, those men aren't gonna hurt Tamiko, because she's not going to allow it. She would have to be willing to make herself vulnerable, and to value someone else's opinion of her to be hurt by them. Reagan, who doesn't realize her mother is a narcissist, because she's never really had a relationship with her, doesn't understand that though. Just like I didn't know my mom was a narcissist until I became an adult. Narcissist women are like chameleons. There's nothing chameleon-like about her. It couldn't be any more obvious that she's a narcissist. Then Reagan's like, actually, I've been opening myself up to new relationships, so I think it's good that you're doing the same thing. And Tamiko says, oh, Reagan, that's so unlike you. In a good way. I'm with you, Rand. Smash that thing. Fuck that tablet. Fucking smash that thing. Fucking break everything in the room. Show. Rand says, Reagan, as your boss and your dad, I order you to destroy that relationship. He's talking to her like she's a little girl. Do what I say, Reagan, I'm your dad. Rand, she doesn't have to listen to you. He has no idea what the hell he's doing. Reagan, of course, doesn't listen and she leaves. Rand looks pretty sad here. At this point, he's starting to realize that getting his family back is going to be harder than he thought. I could have told you that, Rand. You would have been a lot better off renting a motel and calling her on the phone rather than stealing her promotion. I really don't have a whole lot to say about Rand making this movie. He's going through a midlife crisis throughout the entirety of Part 2. And he's terrible at communicating his feelings and relationships in general, and he doesn't understand his wife at all, so he's just trying to impress her. I don't find it that funny, to be honest. It's kind of weird and annoying to me. Rand is in a lot of pain and he's trying to cope. That's all we really need to know. What Reagan's doing here is similar to how I went out of my way to spend time with my father when I realized my mother didn't care about me. I hated my father as a preteen, and as a teenager, I had been reading this book my whole life. But as an adult, I sought him out, and I was like, Dad, Mom doesn't care about me. And he was angry on my behalf and sympathetic towards me. He said, "I can't believe she did that to you." And that was the beginning of our relationship improving. It was like we bonded over my mother hurting both of us. But it's not the same because Tamiko wasn't hurt by anything that happened. She was the one who got everything. She got the house. She's never suffered. Anybody that thinks that this woman is a victim in any way is completely misunderstanding the show. Tamiko is the one who came out on top in this situation. But anyway, the reason Reagan is doing this is because she no longer believes Rand loves her. She's probably thinking, well, if Dad doesn't love me, maybe Mom does? However, instead of this being wholesome, to me it's very disturbing because even though Rand is being a jackass, he does love Reagan and he always did. Tamiko is the one who doesn't care. Keep in mind that her mother didn't reach out to her. She has never done that, unless she wanted something from her daughter. Like asking Reagan to coordinate her wedding to herself. Reagan was the one who initiated this visit. Neither of my parents ignored me like Tamiko ignored Reagan. The level of neglect Reagan experienced from this woman, who dares to call herself a mother, sickens me. The way Reagan is interacting with her mother here reminds me of how I was with my mom when I was a little girl. Agreeing with what she says, giving her approval and validation. No judgment, no criticism. And because Tamiko is now getting the positive attention that she craves, her mother, the narcissist, responds accordingly. Affection. Look how confused Reagan is. She's 30 years old. That's her mother. And she's never touched her daughter's hand before? Are you fucking kidding me? Tamiko carried Reagan in her womb for 9 months, gave birth to her. And then she was like, well, my work's done. And then she never looked at her daughter from that moment on. Disgusting. There's a lot to unpack in this scene. If Rand hadn't been around, Reagan probably would have been close to her mother, because that would have been her only option. She would have sought her mother out and noticed that the way to get attention from her was to not judge her and to give her validation and to agree with everything she said. That's literally what she's doing now as a 30-year-old. So do you really think she wouldn't have done that as a child? Of course she would have. Then her mother would have emotionally abused her just like narcissist mothers always do. And then as Reagan got older, she would have noticed her mother's flaws. And if she dared to point them out, her mother would have turned on her. Her mother 1,000,000% would have hurt her very badly if she'd been the one raising her. With parents like this, Reagan was always going to be badly hurt by one of them. If it hadn't been Rand, it would have been Tamiko. As a woman who knows what it's like to be raised by a narcissist mother, I can tell you that it's not fun. I genuinely believe she was better off being raised by Rand. Her mother's not even capable of love. What's happening? You're looking at me? You're giving me positive attention? Her mother says, I want you to come to my movie. I wasn't even gonna invite you even though you're my daughter, but because you're giving me the attention that I crave and not judging me, I want you to come. Reagan's surprised by this. Normally you judge me, but for once you're supporting me. Reagan literally coordinated her mother's wedding to herself. How is that not support? This woman is an idiot. She has no self-awareness whatsoever. So, because you're supporting me, I want to support you. Reagan, who has never received even the smallest scrap of affection from her mother, is touched by this. I don't know what to say. Say you'll come to my movie where I'm blaming your father for everything and not accepting any responsibility for my despicable, selfish behavior. I abused you just like your dad did, but I'll never stop blaming your father or admit that I'm a bad mom till the day I die. Come to my movie, Reagan, and get me a drink while you're at it. You got it. Reagan's reaction is the complete opposite of mine. She's laughing. To me, this is like watching a horror movie. I have no mouth and I must scream. Oh, Keanu's a vampire. Good. This is far less horrifying. I wonder if that's why this scene exists, to save someone like me from the horror of watching Reagan try to bond with her awful mother. Everyone in Hollywood has a deep, dark secret. Rand was right. Interesting. This line bothered me a lot. If I tell Mom about Keanu, she'll just assume I'm being old, unsupportive Reagan. She needs to hear this from someone she trusts. Reagan is literally blaming herself for her mother neglecting her for her entire life. She thinks it's her fault. That's pretty disturbing. And her mother trusts her latest boyfriend more than her own daughter. Nice. Reagan, fearing for her mother's safety, disguises herself as Keanu and tries to break things off. Her suit malfunctions and Tamiko proceeds to flip out and further demonstrate how selfish and immature she is.
You've been judging me this whole time. How could you do this?
She's appalled and insanely offended that Reagan doesn't like her boyfriend. Lady, you are a grown-ass woman in your 50s. Is it really that big of a deal that your daughter doesn't approve of your latest boyfriend? Look at her face. She's so upset that it's absurd. This is the most emotion I've ever seen her express towards anything. And it's all purely selfish and about her own feelings.
You're just like your father.
This is a pretty loaded statement. First of all, that's a stupid thing to say, because Reagan obviously isn't just like Rand. But there is some truth to this comment, at least in this moment. Reagan is being manipulative because she's trying to protect her mother, which is the same thing Rand did to Reagan when he was raising her. So in this sense, Reagan is behaving like Rand. I'll give you that one, Tamiko. However, everything else she says in this scene is complete lunacy.
You won't work on our relationship, but you'll do anything to try to make me unhappy.
That's utter nonsense. This woman is so self-absorbed that she makes literally everything about herself. Reagan reached out to her mother and went out of her way to compliment her and give her approval, which is the only reason Tamiko responded positively. Reagan was doing all the work trying to connect with her mother, and she obviously wasn't trying to make her mom unhappy. She was literally doing the complete opposite. Rand also was trying to work on their relationship. He had flowers and candles set up. I mean, did you see how decked out that room was? He was straight up trying to woo her. He even had an ice sculpture that said, "I'm sorry." I didn't notice that before. Rand, apologize to Reagan. This is the complete wrong order, Rand. Don't get Tamiko first. That's impossible. He was being sincere and was genuinely trying to fix things between him and his wife. That's why her ignoring him and flaunting her boyfriend in his face like that hurt him so bad. If he'd managed to fix things with Tamiko, I'm pretty sure he would have shifted his focus back to Reagan again. I think he just wanted Tamiko on his side first, and her sending him that text got his hopes up. Then Reagan tries to explain, and Tamiko walks away while Reagan's speaking and won't listen to her at all.
How dare you judge me? I'm leaving. You're not invited to my movie anymore. Don't you dare come.
I can't do Tamiko's voice without making it sound stupid. It's not possible. I have to do the voice. Her childish indignation over being judged is borderline hilarious, and it's giving me flashbacks. Reagan fights Keanu, and then he professes his love to Tamiko, and she's like, "Aww." Then a bunch of other celebrity vampires appear, and they try to kill her. Then Rand comes in, and Tamiko says,
"He's literally a man-child. Way to turn subtext into text, Rand."
Okay, he's definitely being a baby, that's pretty obvious. But her saying this is insanely hypocritical, because she's just as childish as he is. In fact, in my opinion, she's a lot worse. At least Rand's acting like this because he's in pain and he's suffering. Tamiko may not be completely incapable of being hurt, but any pain she feels is very superficial. She's hurt by Reagan criticizing her, and she lashes out and acts like a bratty little girl when her daughter disagrees with her. She doesn't have to literally turn into a baby for me to see how immature she is. And frankly, I didn't need Rand being a man-child to be spelled out for me either, because that was also obvious to me. My first thought when I heard him say this to her was literally, wow, what a baby. I know she hurt your feelings, Rand, but this isn't going to fix anything. Then Rand makes himself even more vulnerable and tells the mother of his child, the woman he was married to for 35 years, that he was trying to impress her. And Tamiko rolls her eyes. Lady, what the hell is wrong with you? I mean, if she doesn't want to be with him, then whatever, but why is she being so mean about it? And why did she lie and say he's not trying to work on their relationship when he obviously is? He may not be doing a very good job, but her saying that he's not trying isn't true. She's literally about to die, and he comes in here trying to save her and pours his heart out to her. And she's just like, "What a baby, my therapist would love this." She's acting like my mother when I tried to tell her how much she hurt me. She's just doing it to Rand instead of Reagan. And he's not even criticizing her, he's just telling her how he feels. Then Reagan uses Rand's blood to kill all the vampires aside from Keanu, and Rand thankfully turns back to normal. Rand, please put on some pants. And then Keanu's like, I'm willing to give up immortality for you, Tamiko. So this guy is incredibly sweet and understanding, and he's basically the ideal partner. And he's willing to give up everything for her. And then she's like, aw, you're sweet, but... What does this woman even want? She doesn't want Rand when he's being sincere and making himself vulnerable and genuinely trying to work on the relationship. And she doesn't want this perfect guy either. I forgot to mention this earlier, but there's an obvious parallel going on between Keanu being a blood-sucking vampire who drains women and uses them for his own benefit, and Tamiko doing the same thing to men. Even the ending of this episode makes Tamiko look bad, because Tamiko ran off and Reagan was the one who had to go out of her way to find her mother again, so they could have a conversation. Once again, Reagan's doing all the work. Reagan apologizes to her first and admits she was wrong about Keanu. So she's not calling her mother out on any of her childish, selfish behavior. And she's like, you were right, Mom. And that prompts Tamiko to apologize back. Narcissists are capable of apologizing, but when narcissists apologize, they do it for themselves. She apologized because she felt validated by what Reagan was saying. Well, she's not criticizing me in any way, and she said I was right, and she said she was sorry first, so... Tamiko hasn't shown any consideration for Reagan's feelings throughout the entire episode. Listen to the dialogue and notice how she makes it about herself. No, I'm sorry. I realize that you have been supporting me this whole time. You did this because you love me. Can't help but notice that she didn't say she loved Reagan. Reagan kept going on and on about how she loves her mom, never heard Tamiko say it back once. This can't it be both line also makes Tamiko look bad. Rand said the same thing when he and Reagan were on the moon. I built a DNA tester out of garbage just to prove you're my daughter. And Reagan says, I know this is more about you being right than being my father. Rand responds, can't it be both? So this exchange is related to how Rand feels about Reagan, and it's telling us something about their relationship. This is about pride for him, but it's also about him wanting to be her father. It can be both. But what he says to her later makes it clear that ultimately his pride is not more important to him than she is. But when Reagan and Tamiko are supposedly having a similar exchange, Reagan asks, did you break up with Keanu because he was a vampire or because he was older than you thought? Can't it be both? This exchange has nothing to do with how Tamiko feels about Reagan. It's about Tamiko. Just like everything is always about her. This character is literally incapable of thinking about anyone other than herself, and the show is going out of its way to show the audience that she has no redeeming qualities. I originally found Reagan attempting to bond with her mother very disturbing and borderline offensive, but I've given it some thought, and I've decided that it's not that big of a deal. Reagan's really not in danger of being hurt by her mother's selfish, cruel nature, but that's because she never had much of a relationship with her to begin with, and she's an adult now. Reagan's no longer vulnerable and naive enough to trust her mother enough, and to long for her approval and attention the way she would have if she tried to connect with her as a child. It's too late for her mother to hurt her like my mother hurt me. That's not even possible at this point. In a way, Rand protected Reagan from her mother just by being there. Even if it was just on a subconscious level, Reagan could tell that Rand was the one who cared and Tamiko didn't. That's why Reagan was so angry at Rand, because they were actually close, and Reagan genuinely believed for her entire life that Rand loved her. Tamiko will never be able to hurt her daughter like Rand can. Interesting. I was definitely confused at first, but I think I understand what the show's doing now. Some of the middle episodes are kinda weird in my opinion. Part 2 definitely has some pacing issues. I'm just going to ignore the episodes that I'm not as interested in, and focus on what I really want to talk about. There's an obvious parallel going on between Rand's attachment to Tamiko and Reagan's attachment to Ron. They're both being needy. Reagan messing with Ron's Catholicizer to speed up brainwashing the Pope, and her trying to pry information out of Ron later, is obviously dishonest and reeks of desperation. I've heard some fans interpret this as Rand's negative influence on her. She's being manipulative like he is. I mean, yeah, but that's an oversimplification in my opinion. A lot of Rand and Reagan's behavior in part 2 is very out of character for both of them. Reagan is literally in the middle of coping with her abuse. That's why she's so desperate not to lose this guy. He's distracting her from her pain and helping her cope with her feelings. Reagan is eventually honest with Ron, but even after they've talked it out, there are still signs they're going to have problems. Her saying, "let's be fucked up together," doesn't sound healthy at all. Reagan and Ron are in bed together, and Ron starts complaining about his job. He obviously hates working for the Illuminati and wants to quit and get a regular job. This bothers Reagan because them complaining about their respective jobs is literally how they got together. It was why they were attracted to each other in the first place. Him hating his job so much is a huge problem because they're in a very similar line of work, and even though Reagan is frustrated with her job at the moment because of Rand, she doesn't hate working for Cognito. She wanted that promotion and she had big plans to run things very differently than JR and Rand. She was excited and was looking forward to changing things. She doesn't want that organization to be evil. She even created an ethics bot in the Part 1 finale. Working for Cognito may have originally been something Rand pushed her towards, but it was also something that Reagan eventually decided she wanted. Even at the start of the show, it's very obvious that she was looking forward to that promotion and that she was doing it for herself and not for Rand. Ron's struggles and his frustration with his job have made him very cynical. He's given up on his original dreams of helping to make the world a better place. He thinks the world's broken and there's no fixing it, and longs for a simpler life. Reagan's not like that though. She's more of an optimist and still wants to try to make a positive change in the world. There have been signs from the beginning that this relationship isn't going to work. They obviously care about each other, but they don't have enough in common, and they don't want the same things. It's possible that Reagan never even would have fallen for this guy if she hadn't been in such a bad way when they first met. Even the way he interacts with Brett is a sign that this isn't working. Ron doesn't get along with her friends. It's incredibly awkward and hard to watch, and it's supposed to be. They do eventually start getting along, but Ron ultimately concludes that their jobs are always going to put a strain on their relationship. The main difference between Rand's attachment to Tamiko and Reagan's attachment to Ron is that Rand and Tamiko's relationship is purely toxic, and there's no hope of it ever working. There's literally nothing Rand can do to make that woman love him. Tamiko is a purely negative influence on Rand, and he would be a lot better off without her. He doesn't have the emotional intelligence to realize that though, and he thinks he needs her. Rand didn't have this weird neediness for Tamiko until he lost Reagan, so there's obviously a correlation here. Reagan and Ron's relationship is more complicated though, because even though it starts out pretty unhealthy, there is hope of this relationship working, if Reagan's willing to make some pretty big compromises. Is she willing to do that though? Rand uses that stupid bill he had passed in a previous episode to force Tamiko to go on a date with him. He obviously shouldn't be doing this. If she doesn't want to date him, she doesn't have to. But he's desperate at this point, and when he was being sincere with her, she wasn't even remotely interested, and she ripped his heart out. So that's why he's resorted to this. He should just give up, but this is Rand we're talking about, so he's not gonna do that. At least not yet. He uses the hollow chamber to simulate taking her to Paris, and tries to impress her by reminding her how powerful he is now. She kinda acts like she's interested here, but she seems more interested in controlling him, and getting him to do whatever she wants. Look at their faces. She suggests they go for a romantic stroll, and he agrees to it, and he looks hopeful, but then she pushes him more, while reciting poetry. She was married to this guy for 35 years, she has to know that's not something he's comfortable doing. So it almost seems like she suggested it just to mess with him. This is like a game to her. I think part of why he leaves here is because he isn't confident he can impress her. She's pushing him too much out of his comfort zone, and there's no telling what else she's going to ask him to do. That's why he tells Robotus to tag in for him. He's definitely being a manipulative jerk, and I don't approve of his behavior in the slightest. But as I said, he's acting like this because when he was being genuine with her, she hurt him. His walls are back up now. When Robotus goes in there pretending to be Rand and recites some weird poetry, she randomly slaps him out of nowhere. She thinks that's Rand, and he's doing exactly what she told him to do. And then she slaps him? Why did she do that? Probably just because she wanted to. Then she tells him to blow up the Eiffel Tower. She doesn't know they're in a simulation, so her telling him to do that is pretty insane. Then he's gonna do it, and she starts laughing and says, I just wanted to see how you'd react. You were really gonna do it, weren't you? Honestly, this woman's behavior is a lot more disturbing to me than anything I've seen Rand do. She's behaving very erratically, and she loves the power he's giving her right now. Rand might be able to temporarily gain her interest if he bent over backwards for her and did whatever she wanted, but as soon as she got bored, she'd just throw him away again. That's what she does to every man she dates. It's funny because Robotus is the only character in this show that sees Tamiko for what she really is. Rand can't see it, and neither can Reagan, but Robotus spells it out for the audience. You're like a yoga mom mixed with a sociopath. I have no idea what you're going to say next. That's true, her behavior is very inconsistent and unpredictable. She acts like she's enamored with Keanu when he professes his love for her, and then he does it a moment later, but this time she runs away. That doesn't make any sense. It's like she just does whatever she wants in the moment. You're the only human I can't predict. Robotus does make a comment to Reagan in the last episode about learning empathy from Tamiko's touch, but him saying this is obviously meant to be a joke. Tamiko isn't even capable of empathy. There has been no evidence that Tamiko cares about anyone other than herself. The fact that a robot can learn empathy, but Tamiko can't, is literally the joke. Just like her calling Rand a narcissist when she's the one who's the narcissist, is literally the joke. Tamiko says, you're uncharacteristically vulnerable. I find it weak and sexy. So the first time I watched this, I started laughing in disbelief. I was very disturbed by this line, but I also thought it was funny because of how out of nowhere it was. This is literally the most predatory thing I've ever heard a woman say. So Rand, the man she was married to for 35 years, and the father of her child, showing vulnerability, or being weak, as she calls it, is sexy to her. She doesn't gently cup his face and say, "Aw, you're being vulnerable." She violently jerks him forward and shoves her hand in his mouth. So Tamiko would either hurt Rand or take advantage of him if he showed vulnerability to her. Which one of them is the bad guy again? Then Rand sees them kissing and he comes in, turns off the simulation, and he and Robotus start fighting. Take note of Tamiko's comment here. I'm not into this. So she likes this? Then a moment later she stops liking it and says, "Why did I think you would ever change? I'm never getting back together with you." And then she storms away. There's no real consistency to this character's behavior. And the show made it clear even from the beginning how awful she is. Part 2 just made her look worse. I mean, if Tamiko has any redeeming qualities, someone tell me what they are. And give evidence for it. Because I haven't seen anything.
Get out while you still can.
Good. I was getting very tired of you. Go away and don't come back. Statler says he needs to leave to think. Thank God. I don't think I could have taken much more of this. I want Rand to go back to normal. Go back to how you are, Rand. Reagan keeps texting Ron, but he won't respond. JR comes in and frantically tells everyone that the fabric of space-time has been tampered with. Rand has unearthed Project Reboot, a machine that can create alternate realities? Gee, I wonder what Rand could possibly be doing. What a mysterious mystery. Then we see this flashback of Rand and JR in college. JR is an uptight rich boy, and Rand is the much cooler stoner guy. Who needs friends when you have robots? I love it when he owns JR. Nicely done, Rand. He and Rand don't like each other, but they decide to work together to come up with an idea so they can become rich. Rand winds up creating a machine that can alter reality. It still needs tweaking, but he says if they can perfect it, they can become gods. The Shadowboard kidnaps them and tells them they're tampering with forces not meant for man. But they're impressed, and in exchange for dismantling Project Reboot, the Shadowboard will give them the power to control the world on their behalf. JR and Rand agree, but Rand isn't willing to give up complete control because he doesn't trust the Shadowboard. He and JR bury Project Reboot in a secret location, his insurance policy. So this is something he just wanted to have available, even if he never intended to use it. Where have we heard that before? Everyone's confused about why Rand's doing this. He has the power he wanted, so why alter reality now? Rand must have used the machine again, Reagan says. She's back to calling him Rand, distancing herself emotionally. She doesn't think he loves her. Reagan's friends all abandon her in hope of a better future. Only Brett stays, her closest friend. Leave it to my dad to destroy reality just to keep his job, Reagan says as they get closer. I understand how you feel, Reagan. You were close to your father and you trusted him your whole life. And he betrayed you just like my mother betrayed me. That's why you hate him so much. Because you never really believed he didn't care, until he wouldn't apologize for hurting you. This isn't just about my dad, it's about my mom too. Two different relationships, two different kinds of pain mixed together. I did love my father, but my feelings for him were always complicated, and our relationship was always strained. He didn't understand me, and sometimes even after our relationship had improved, he'd say something that would hurt my feelings. I know he wasn't doing it on purpose, but I was sensitive due to low self-esteem and other issues, especially after what my mother did to me, and sometimes it was hard for me to believe he cared. And I held on to the hope that with time I could become stronger and be more patient with him, and we could fix things between us. I knew he was trying, and I loved him for it. Then he died, and that chance to be close to him was gone forever. "You're all I have," was one of the last things he'd said to me. Unresolved feelings of pain and guilt slowly bled over into hatred towards my mother, like nothing I'd ever felt before. My brother never really understood how I felt. He'd had a better relationship with our father than I did, and I think that made it easier for him to move on. I don't think he felt the same kind of betrayal from our mother that I did either. He never hated her like I did. He told me once, she'll never apologize, because facing what she did to our family would destroy her. I love her as much as I can. But for me, it's different. I don't love her at all anymore. It was all I could do to stop hating her. I don't want to drag you into this. I've seen your reality, and it looks good. If I succeed, I'll see you again. Good luck. Brett can't help her. He never really understood how she felt. She has to face this alone. If she doesn't allow her anger and hatred to consume her, she can finally start to heal from her abuse. Then she can move forward and try to find happiness. A better reality. There's a lot of subversion going on here. Rand's really not like my mother, he's much more like my father. They put too much of my dad in this character. For me to hate him, that's not possible for me. This made me cry the first time I watched it, and I'm probably gonna have a hard time even recording my thoughts on this, but I'll do my best to keep it together. There's a lot going on in this scene. Rand is using Project Reboot, his insurance policy, to get back what he wants more than anything. He had what he wanted before, but he lost it, so now he's trying to get it back. She came in here ready to kill him. That's how angry she was. That's how much she hated him. Remember how she was calling him Rand earlier? When she sees him like this, she calls him Dad. Rand is trying to find a reality where his family doesn't hate him. He's been looking for days and can't find one. So what this is telling us is that Rand loves Reagan, which I already knew. Unfortunately, him doing this is also telling us that he's not accepting responsibility for what he did. He's no longer trying to fix things, he's trying to run. If Tamiko saw Rand like this, she would have hurt him. She would have taken advantage of him and used him. And to me, that's evil. Selfish, cruel woman. You only care about yourself. You're not even worth hating. I'm done with you. Reagan, who isn't cruel like her mother, is kind to Rand when she sees him like this. But she's always been kind to him when he shows vulnerability to her. I had my job, I had power, but you don't know what matters most until you lose it. He had already decided what mattered more to him, but her finding out about what he did all those years ago ruined all their progress. And he didn't know how to fix it anymore, and he still doesn't. Please help me fix it, he says. Dad, you can't just hit a button and expect a relationship to go back to the way it was. That's true. You have to accept responsibility for your mistakes and apologize. And try to be better. And he knew that, and he'd already done it. But he wouldn't do it again when she found out about Oren, and then he kept making everything worse. I know it's scary to give up control, but you don't have to do it alone. Let's shut this thing down together. Reagan didn't think Ren loved her. She was certain that he didn't. But he does, and he always did. She knows that now. They were both in pain and suffering the whole time. Reagan was just coping better than he was. I knew there was a reason I didn't like this character. I never liked him. I didn't really care that much that Rand was a retired villain because I knew there was more to him than that. The same can't be said for JR. Much like Tamiko, he's simplistic. Money and power is all he cares about. He doesn't even understand what Rand's trying to do, and completely misconstrues the entire situation. He literally just shot Reagan's finger off. And if he had any observational skills whatsoever, he'd be able to see that Rand's in a pretty bad state right now. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Rand says, how do I look like I'm enjoying this? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's pretty stupid, isn't he? I've been propping you up your whole life. Without me, you'd just be a rich brat in the non-shadow government. Smack. I'm gonna get what's coming to me, the money, the house, the car. Fuck you, JR. He's not like you anymore. He decided there was something more important to him than those things. More important to him than all the power in the world. Kick his ass, Rand. Reagan's friends come back and take out JR. Get fucked, you dipshit. I can't stand that dude. They reset the timeline and Reagan says JR and Rand are both going before the robes for sentencing. I spent my whole life thinking you were a hero or a villain, but you're not. You're just my dad. The screw up. That's more or less the same conclusion I came to about my own father. But you can't screw up if you don't try. He was trying. And he loves her, and that matters to me. That's what makes forgiveness even possible. At least to me. I don't think she forgave him. I don't know if she did or not, I can't read her mind. But it didn't seem to me like she did. However, just because she didn't forgive him now doesn't mean she never will. Forgiveness can take time. Sometimes it takes a lot of time. You can't just flip a switch and instantly forgive someone when they hurt you this bad. Rand did all he could do at this point though. He accepted responsibility for what he'd done, and he even agreed with her and he apologized. She knows he loves her now. Listen to the dialogue. Maybe Shadow Prison is the best way to protect you from yourself. That's probably true. He doesn't even know how to take care of himself, much less anyone else. She said that out of love. She wants to protect him. I think interventions are bullshit, Rand says. So he doesn't even like the idea. But then he continues. But maybe you're right. Look how happy Reagan is. What? You're wrong and I'm right? Rand, I knew you could do it. That's character development. He's back to how he was, and even better now because he accepted responsibility for everything he did. His apology might not seem that good to some people, but it's actually a pretty good apology. He said he was sorry for everything, and then he accepted his punishment. He didn't wait to see if she would forgive him. He didn't pressure her. He doesn't even seem to expect forgiveness. I'm pretty impressed. He did everything right. Good job, Rand. It's obviously not up to me whether Reagan forgives him or not, but I think she probably will eventually. That's her father, and she loves him. He's basically the only parent she's ever had. Her relationship with her mother is never going to be as meaningful. I don't think this is the last we'll see of Rand. He could be gone for quite a while, but I think he'll be back eventually. It doesn't make sense narratively to not redeem him, in my opinion. He's too sympathetic. I could be wrong, of course, but that's my prediction. She does need space from him, though. She's needed that for a while, and that's another reason why him going to prison isn't even a bad thing. Now he can't hurt himself anymore, and she can start to recover. This is honestly probably one of the best ways it could have ended. Go to dad jail, Rand, and don't come back until you stop being a bad dad. He's such a bad dad, but I like him anyway, I always did. That Barrow stuff had me dying, you guys. I was like, look out, Reagan, he thinks he's a good dad, run! He's stuck in a cell with JR. That's kind of BS. Kick his ass, Rand. Okay, now Ron. I was never really that invested in Reagan's relationship with Ron, to be honest. I knew Rand was going to give up eventually, and Reagan would get her job back, and Ron's cynicism towards making a positive change in the world was always pretty off-putting to me. I'm glad Ron was there for her. He helped her a lot, and she helped him too. They do care about each other, but it was always obvious to me that this relationship wasn't going to last. Reagan's afraid Ron's going to break up with her, but instead he tells her he loves her, and she says it back. He wants her to run away with him. He says they can erase their memories of classified intel, so no one will come for them, and they can be free. You can't fix the world, he says. Something will always fuck it up again. Let's forget everything and start our own world. Do you really want to forget everything, Reagan? All the pain and the love too? Your dad? Brett? Your job where you'd finally be in a position to help make the world a better place? You worked hard for this your whole life. Are you going to give all that up for him? Reagan says she'll think about it. She searches through countless realities where she and Ron can be happy together. She probably did give up her job for him in some of these realities, and she resented him for it, which is part of why they're fighting constantly. You're the only thing that matters to me, he told her earlier. She does love him, but he's not the only thing that matters to her. She doesn't want him to know that though. She doesn't want to hurt him. He's willing to stay with her even if she doesn't quit working at Cognito. But even in this reality, she's more interested in her work. And Ron looks completely miserable. She finally finds a reality where Ron is happy with someone else. This is the solution, she says. Reagan leaves Brett in charge and goes with Ron to Appleton. They erase their fingerprints and profess their love for each other one last time. I can't wait to finally sleep at night, Ron says just before erasing his memories. Reagan does love Ron, and she probably could have been happy with him if she'd been willing to forget everything, but she isn't willing to do that. She does love him though, and she wants him to be happy. I don't really agree that Reagan sacrificed her happiness here. That's oversimplifying things. She only would have been happy if she'd erased her memories. She and Rand could have gone back to how they were if she'd been willing to do that with him. She wasn't willing to do that for either of them. She doesn't want to forget. Her life experiences are what have made her who she is. You're free now, Reagan says. Sorry I couldn't be free with you. She does love him, but they wouldn't have been happy together unless she was willing to forget everything and become a completely different person. It wouldn't have even been real. Humanity needs someone to make the hard choices. She's satisfied that Ron will find happiness even if she isn't there with him. I have a job to do. That's right, Reagan. The world may be broken, but you're not. Keep all your experiences, the love and the pain. Learn from it and become stronger. Stay kind and hold on to your optimism. And forgive eventually, if that's what you want. But don't forget, and keep moving forward. Reagan goes back to Cognito and reunites with Brett. I kinda missed Brett in part 2, but he couldn't really help her with what she was going through. I'm happy they're back together now, though. Part 2 ends on a cliffhanger, with the Robe saying it's time to begin Project X-37. So Rand was right not to trust these guys. Sounds like they're the actual villains. Interesting. I just heard this show got canceled. This is literally one of the only shows on Netflix I even cared about. It was pretty important to me, so saying I'm bothered by it being canceled is putting it mildly. They already said they'd make a second season, so they've got some nerve going back on their word like this. Netflix obviously doesn't care about content creators at all, and they clearly don't care about their customers either. This show isn't even unpopular. The ratings are actually pretty good, and fans clearly want more. But it's still being canceled. I don't really understand why, something to do with tax write-offs or something. So Netflix only cares about money. They don't care about anything else. Kinda like JR. He was literally the bad guy in the finale. So Netflix is acting like the villain in their own show. That's pretty funny. I'm canceling my subscription and I won't ever support them again. Netflix is dead to me now. Sorry to end things on a sour note, shows have come back even after being cancelled, but I'm not sure what we can even do to help get it renewed. Hopefully Netflix will change their mind or it can get picked up by another streaming service or network. If Netflix doesn't change their mind, then I'm just done with them forever. But I highly doubt they care. Anyway, season 1 was pretty solid. I was very satisfied with how they tied everything together. Whether Inside Job is a masterpiece or not is debatable, but it's impressively unique. Whether you like everything about it or not, I don't really see how someone with any emotional maturity wouldn't at least be impressed by how unique some of the writing is. I've never seen an adult animated comedy with this kind of subversive storytelling that deals with such adult themes. Some of the writing is very mature, and the show clearly has a lot of respect for its adult audience. Watching this show and making these videos has almost been like therapy for me. I genuinely think it helped me to talk about this stuff. It always used to hurt me to even talk about my dad, and it was hard for me to make these videos. The emotion this show evoked in me was pretty intense, but I think I managed to work through some of my issues because of it. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Shion. I have so much respect for you. I had a pretty good understanding of what the show was doing from the beginning, but so many fans misunderstanding the characters of Rand and Tamiko made me more emotional about it. I could see that certain aspects of the show weren't being understood properly, and that's what prompted me to make these videos in the first place. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like or give a thumbs down if you didn't enjoy my commentary, and don't forget to subscribe. Bye for now.